Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our first Virtual CPD Summer School. It's fantastic to see so many of you here this morning. My name is Charlotte Stevenson and I'm a Business Development Manager at Cardiff University. Just a couple of bits of housekeeping before we get started this morning. If you want to use the chat function, we've got that available if you want to talk to the team. There's a few of us on hand if you've got any sound problems, anything like that. We've also got the Q&A. If you've got any questions you'd like to pose to Teena, type them in there and we'll try and get to them at the end of the session. We're all working from home, so please bear with us if there's any technical problems, any comedy talking while on mute, or any interruptions from children, animals, or persistent delivery drivers. It's enough from me. I'm really thrilled to introduce Teen Clouston this morning. Teena is a reader in life balance and wellbeing at Cardiff University, and I know it's going to be a good session. I've got my notebook ready to go. Over to you, Teena.
Thank you all. I'm just going to share my screen. There we go, and we will start. Okay, thank you, Charlotte, for the introduction. Good morning, all. I want to start by saying thank you to all of those that have sent in examples on the Mentimeter about some of the challenges that you're having right now. We want you to use the chat pane and we'll try and get back to some of your questions at the end, along with some of the things you mentioned in the Mentimeter. You might want to have a pen and paper to hand because I've got some reflective exercises that I'm going to pause as I go through. I'm hoping to get through the session in about 40 to 45 minutes, so we will have a time for a chat at the end. So what is the purpose of this session? Well, the title might have given it away. we're trying to look at work-life balance in really unprecedented times, looking at particularly the COVID situation. Now, obviously, work-life balance is a problem outside of this particular context too, but it's really throwing the work-life balance issue into relief because we're going through a process of massive change. Now, I want you to know, if you're sitting out there and you're not working at the minute because you're in a state of furlough, you're shielding, or you've sadly lost your job, do stick with us, because some of the examples I'm sharing are about adapting to change. So it isn't just about balancing work life, it's about life balance and change as well. So some of the exercises I'm going to look at will help. Stay with us. Before I start, I want to kind of go through some of the background issues, why this is happening. So what is work-life balance, and what are the issues that we're experiencing? And if you start here looking at this square box in blue, boundaries and barriers have changed. Excuse me, guys. And you will all know that that is the situation that most of us are suffering from. However, it's really interesting to know that we're not all coming from the same place with this. There's a polarity of experiences for people. There's integration at one end of it, and most of you that have responded to the Mentimeter and sent in challenges are at that point, where work has become home and home has become work, and you cannot separate the two. And how on earth are you going to manage it? Some of us are in a state of separation, however, and these are people who are possibly frontline workers who have made a decision not to go home because they don't want to risk passing COVID to their family. Or you could be people that are furloughed or have lost your job. And there's some really interesting things going on for you guys around this separation and the loss of the work role that hopefully we can talk about as we progress. The other thing that's really interesting is that on top of all this, responsibilities and roles in both work and home have changed absolutely fundamentally for people. It's just gone into chaos for all of us. And this is really the sort of conflict and adaptation issues that we're not coping with very well right now. And, take some strength from the fact that we're all in the same boat, guys, and we're all trying to adapt, and it isn't easy. So some of you might suddenly find that you're not only doing your full-time job in a completely different place and trying to manage that with caring for your kids, but you're also having to take on the role of being a teacher and take on that responsibility, which is an extra thing. Some of you are going to have extra caring responsibilities, and you're going to be dealing with that on top of trying to do your job and doing all the things at home. Some of you, and I know this from the work that you've sent in to me, are taking on new roles and responsibilities at work, or you're having to adapt your roles and responsibilities to meet expectations in the workplace, and that's really tough. And some of you may be furloughed and having to just kind of adapt to roles and responsibilities at home that you haven't done before. For all of us, wherever we are on that sort of continuum of change, are having to try and adapt to that. We're having to try to be adaptable and flexible. And that is such an underlying problem in our present state and how we're feeling about things. And this was coming through over and over and over again with some of the examples that you've shared with me in the Mentimeter. And the big outcome from that is, and this was a big issue for many, many, many people, how on earth can I be productive at work when I'm working under these very, very different situations? How on earth can I meet all my home expectations and do it well when I'm working in this really wild situation? And these are the issues that we're going to hopefully address as we progress through. But what's really interesting is that what most of us do to cope in situations like this, because we're people and we care and we want to do our job well and we want to work at home well and care for our family, is that we compromise our personal well-being. And that's a massive problem. And again, this is coming through over and over and over again in the examples that you've sent through to me. It's a human nature thing. We compromise ourselves and our personal well-being in order to meet the expectations that others have of us. Well, that's not a good thing. And I'm going to talk to you more as we progress through about how we can address that. And this next slide, it'll hopefully help you to understand a little bit about why that compromising that well-being is not good. I want to define these terms so that we are all in the same page as we progress through and we look at some of the strategies. What do we mean by well-being, life balance, and resilience? What's really interesting about these things is that they're so interconnected. They rely on one another. And that's very, very important when you're thinking about how you can address these issues and get to a better state of calm and well-being in your life in a time of change and conflict in terms of work and life. Well-being, and I guess this is what most of you will think about when you think about well-being, is really about being comfortable in terms of your physical and emotional well-being. And that healthiness, that sense of well-being, has to be across different dimensions of life. Now, I don't want you to worry about that term dimensions yet. We're going to define that in the next slide. So let's move on to life balance. What on earth do we mean by that? Any books you read about life balance will give you different definitions of it. And it's important for you to understand that critically, when we talk about life balance, what we're talking about is your personal resources of time and energy and how we use them effectively across different life domains. So your work domain, your personal domain, your home domain, your social domain. How on earth do you use them effectively? And they're your resources of time and energy. And when you overuse them, that's when you begin to become exhausted. So it's very important to remember that when we're talking about work-life balance or life balance generally, we're talking about personal resources of time and energy and how to use them effectively. Resilience, often misunderstood word, often used, unfortunately, in wrong situations. And this is what it means. Resilience is about the ability to adapt successfully, so to do it reasonably well, in times of stress and adversity. And my goodness, are we in a state of stress and adversity right now? So resilience is a coping strategy. It's a means of managing very, very difficult situations. Interestingly, the most effective type of resilience, perhaps unsurprisingly, is one that you can sustain over time. So it's about having resilience that is sustainable over time. And that's really important right now because we are dealing with environmental issues that are impacting on us, and we're now moving into the 4th month of change. And you know, things are going to continue to be different for some time into the future. So when we look at our coping strategies, when we look at building our resilience up, we need to think about having them over time. And I want you to reflect on that as we progress through the talk and look at some of the strategies. How can I put them in place over time? So life balance, well-being and resilience are interconnected, as that little figure there shows you. They all rely on one another and they all work together. So if you can get your life balance better, and that's what we're aiming to do after today, your well-being will improve and your resilience, your ability to cope, will be better because you will have more resources basically to do it. Now, I promised you I would go through the dimensions of wellness, and I also promise you these will make perfect sense as I go through them and you'll understand completely what it is that I mean. I want to start at the top with a lovely salmon pink one, which says emotional well-being. And that's defined as coping effectively with life and creating satisfying relationships. Well, do I need to say more? Really, at the moment, we're going through this unprecedented process of change. We're being asked to cope. We are trying very hard, but our emotional well-being is being impacted upon as a result. Relationships have really been impacted upon, both our close relationships, people we live with at home, because we're now on top of each other, working in confined spaces, our work relationships, because we've been separated from people, or we're working with them in ways that we're not comfortable with through interfaces like this one, or our wider networks and support systems, our wider family networks that we can't get to see, or we're only interfacing with through WhatsApp and FaceTime. It's very difficult. And that's an aspect of well-being that's really been impacted upon. Financial. This is also a very nasty little fella that's impacting on a lot of people right now. Some of you may be out there listening to me. And the financial situation has been impacted upon in many, many ways. For people who are on furlough, you know, your money's been reduced substantially. For people who are self-employed, it's been an absolute traumatic time trying to go out and do your job and maintain social distancing, if you can do it at all. So these are issues that are impacting on people in financial situations. Some people have lost their jobs. Some people find it difficult to meet financial demands even when they're earning their money and they're working full time. So this is a huge problem, and that one's going to stick with us for some time. Social, I mean, I've already touched on that, and the emotional well-being impacted on multiple levels. The lockdown and the social distancing and the new ways of working have all influenced that. People who got back to me on the Mentimeter were saying that, you know, their social time is spent doing sports with others. Well, of course, that's impacted upon with social distancing. You can't do that anymore. So it's impacting on people in multiple ways. Spiritual dimensions, which is the one now at the bottom here. I want to take a little bit of time on this one because it's often forgotten, it's often overlooked. The spiritual dimension of wellness is something that we tend to forget even at the best of times, let alone the worst. And spiritual, the first thing that might jump to mind is religion and church, and obviously that's a very, very important part of spiritual well-being. For some people, it may have improved exponentially over time because they can spend more time with this right now. For others, they've been separated from their church, separated from the congregation, unable to go. But there are other aspects of spirituality which may resonate to some of my listeners. And this is a kind of spirituality that's found in going out in nature, spending time in what we call being activities, activities that are really important to you as a person and give you meaning and purpose in life. And again, some people I've spoken to have found more opportunity to do this as a result of lockdown and changes in their work patterns. But others, you know, that's been really constrained and constricted. And I just wanted to reflect on these dimensions as I go through them and think about which are impacting on you and how that's making you feel in terms of your well-being and your stress levels. Occupational is, of course, our jobs, and we've touched on this a little bit when we talked about the financial aspects. But if you look at the definition, personal satisfaction and enrichment derived from one's work. Well, I cannot think that there is anyone listening today that hasn't had that influenced in some way, that sense of well-being has not been thrown into turmoil in some way. There's very few people who are finding work is more satisfying right now because we're dealing with such change in it and such precarity. Jobs have become uncertain. Job hours have changed. Hours of work have changed. Routines have changed. Ability to access work has changed. For some people, and I know some of you are listening because I've seen it in the Mentimeter feedback, and these are frontline workers, NHS workers, social care workers, people driving delivery vans, people in shops, our grocery workers who are often forgotten, put in much, much more hours of working. And these tend to be the ones that are also separated from home more because their jobs expanded so much. Massive, massive changes going on there. Physical. This is another interesting one, which has caused lots of change for lots of people. Some have found that they can actually access more opportunities for physical well-being by going out more, walking more, running, cycling. Others, particularly those of you that have team sports, feel that that's been really constrained. Some have found we can't do it because our work has expanded so much and our care and responsibilities and teaching the kids or the hours of work have increased, and that physical well-being is starting to slowly dissipate. I want you to draw your attention to things like diet, sleep and nutrition as well, because those have really been impacted upon by things that have happened in terms of our patterns and ways of working and our access to the outside world. Maybe we're not thinking about what we're eating so much and we're doing fast food or doing simple meals. And sleep is a huge problem. And we're going to come back to sleep in some of the strategies later, because I imagine that most people are finding they're waking up at 3 a.m. There's something about 3 a.m. I don't know what it is. And worrying about a lot of things. And the molehills are becoming mountains. There's real reasons for why that happens in terms of our anatomy and how we think. I haven't got time to talk to you about that today, but we will look at strategies to help with that as we progress on. Intellectual well-being, this is an interesting one. And again, I've been speaking to people who have found opportunities to improve this as a result of what's happening. Maybe going to the Hay Festival online, maybe visiting the Uffizi Gallery online. Others have found intellectual pursuits, time to do things that you enjoy for yourself, have just been lost. So it's really about you reflecting on that for you. Last but not least, and perhaps the one that's impacting most on us all and something we can't control, is the environment well-being. If we look at the definition, environment well-being is about good health, occupying pleasant, stimulating environments that support your well-being. I have to say I've met many people where this has improved because they're going out into nature more, they're doing more gardening, they're finding they're enjoying being out in nature because there's less pollution, they can breathe more, they can hear the birds, they can see more happening, you know, and it is really positive in that sense. But for many, the fact that there's a hidden virus out there, that it's causing problems, that we can't see it, that it's caused us to be locked down into our houses where we're vulnerable or we're dealing with the impacts, the environment has become a very unsafe place. So these are all the dimensions of well-being that are impacting on us in different ways. So what's the outcome? Surprisingly, I think for most of the people that are listening to me today, because you probably wouldn't be here if this was you, this is a sweet pot for many. Some people that I've spoken to have found their life balance is much better. These are the ones that have got that environmental and spiritual well-being that I've just spoken about. These are the people who have no financial concerns. Their job is secure, perhaps they're retired. They're healthy, or they can maintain their health because there's no underlying conditions that are really concerning for them. They can get that intellectual stimulation, and they've got some sense of meaning and purpose in life. But for most of us, this is where we are. We're in a state of stress, and this is because we're going through this period of change and this transitional period where we're adjusting and we're trying to juggle too many things. You can see the poor lady here on the right who's looking like she's about to collapse under the weight. And this is because demands exceed supply in terms of those personal resources I talked about of time and energy. We just haven't got enough to share out to do all the things that we feel that we're expected to do. We're overburdened, we're worried, those sleepless nights, all lead into poor concentration spans and all lead into a state of psychological or emotional tension and pressure that we're all desperately trying to deal with. And although that image there on the right is meant to be funny, you can see that the second part of it says, I am relaxationally challenged. And I just want to draw your attention to that because in fact, that is exactly what is happening. We are relaxationally challenged. And some of the steps we're going to talk about is by putting space in for yourself in order to achieve your well-being. Another state that's happening, and actually some people who sent in on the Mentimeter are definitely experiencing rust out, is along that continuum of stress, but it's a slightly different reason they're experiencing things. And these are the people who have actually maybe lost roles, or roles have changed fundamentally and they're trying to adjust. Or they feel that they're stuck in a rut, and life seems very repetitive and routinized. And you're trying to sort of make some sense of a very different landscape of everyday life. And what that leads to is a sense of being apathetic and listless, demotivated and frustrated. Many of you talk to me about this in the Mentimeter, cynical about your work or your life right now, and feeling very detached. If you look at the image there on the left, really, to address that, we need to think about making positive change, putting some sense of stimulation in there, some sort of self-development. So again, these are strategies we're going to talk about as we progress on. What's the outcome of these things? Well, burnout. And some of you actually mentioned this in the Mentimeter. And burnout is a horrible state to be in. It's complete emotional and physical exhaustion. It leads to low sense of accomplishment. So think about that in your personal life, in your work. A sense of depersonalization. You know, you're so worn out and so exhausted as a person that you can't actually find yourself. And it also leads to compassion fatigue. Usually when I talk about compassion fatigue, I talk about it in terms of people who give to others in their jobs, so healthcare workers, social care workers particularly. Because when you're exhausted and burnt out, when there's nothing left in you as a person in terms of your own personal resources, how on earth can you give to others? It's an impossible dilemma. And it causes more stress and anxiety. What the COVID situation has done is meant that many of us who are not in those kind of jobs are actually feeling we're suffering from compassion fatigue in caring for our family members, or caring for our friends and our colleagues who might need support. And we're becoming or moving towards a state of collapse. Well, what can we do? We have to replenish ourselves. And this is where thinking about yourself as someone that you have to look after in terms of well-being is really important. And hard as it is, guys, and I know it's hard, but hard as it is, you have to start thinking about how you can put something back into you in order that you can give to others. Whatever situation you're in right now, if you're struggling giving to others, then it's about finding something to put back into yourself, replenishing your own resources. So let's look at some of the steps that we've got to try and achieve this and to think about how we can do it in the best way that we can. So step 1, aim to get balance back in your life. And you're probably thinking, oh, what is she talking about? She doesn't know what I'm going through. She doesn't know how hard it is for me to get some balance in my life. Well, actually, I hope I do. And it's just about thinking through some strategies that can make that better. So the first thing I want to draw your attention to is this little diagram called the ship of life. I've taken this straight out of my book. I should really have done a different ship of life for this one, but I wanted to give you an example of what a good life, a good balanced life might look like. So the ship of life, as you can see there on the left, is a little ship floating on the sea that has very separate cargoes in it with lots of different dimensions of well-being and different domains of life in it. So this person, they have work, they have home, they have time to be caring and support their family members and others. They've got being time, that's the spiritual stuff. They've got good rest and relaxation times, they're sleeping well. They've got a social life, they've got time to spend in nature, they've got leisure pursuits. This is a perfect balance. This is the kind of thing that we want to achieve. Right now, we're probably not going to be able to do all that. And that is absolutely fine. That is absolutely fine. But we can do some of it. There are some things that we can put back in. Now, most of us are going to have an image there of work and caring or home. That's going to be the ship of life. There's not going to be anything else. If we get a hole in one of those compartments, what happens when a boat or a ship only has 2 things, or worse still, 1 in it, is that you then sink and you go under. So you have to put the other bits in there. There has to be something in there in order for you to get resilience. So I want you to really think about how your life balance looks now. I want you to draw your own ship of life when we finish today. And I want you to think about what you can put back in to sustain your own health and well-being. And it only has to be small moves. It only has to be things that you can take slowly, 1 step at a time. But you need to put something back in there in order to get more resilience and sustainability for your own health and well-being. How can we do that? Well, let's move on to step 2. Step 2 is about putting meaning back into your life. And I've talked a lot about this as we've gone through the other slides. So the first step in order to get that ship of life looking a bit more balanced and a bit better is to think to yourself, what is most meaningful to me? Now, this can be anything. This can be anything. And it's about you and your choice and what you can make it for you. An example for me is drawing. I've just started my drawing again. And if you go onto my website or go onto my Twitter account, you'll see my latest effort. And I try and do that on a weekend. It's the first time in my life I've actually thought Sundays was a good day, because I'm trying to use some time on a Sunday to do something that's positive for me. It's really helping me feel well. So it's about finding something for you that's important and putting that in there. Small moves, okay? I'm aiming to do 1 drawing a month. I'm not putting too much on myself to make it too important, to take my energy away from other things. I want to try and enjoy it. So a reflective point for you is to think about what is or what was important to you pre-COVID, and try to think about how you can put it in there into your life. And we're going to look at strategies in managing time as we progress on. In work, and most of us are trying to manage what is a very difficult work environment right now because of the way we're having to interface with work. Think about what it is I like doing. What do you enjoy and how can you put that back in? I enjoy doing things like this, so I was pleased to have this invite. But for others of you, some of you have mentioned this in the Mentimeter, It's about having meaningful meetings with people or meaningful conversations with people. And that's about thinking about how you manage these different types of meeting and these different types of circumstances, and thinking about how you can carve out some sense of meaning when you've got a different interface with people and you can't share a room. So making time, for example, to ensure that you both have quiet space, that you've taken the hour to be with one another, that maybe you bring a cup of tea into the meeting together, we're having shared virtual lunches at work. These are the kind of things that might help you to feel that you can get a little bit of meaning and personal contact back into your job. Let's move on because I'm aware of the time. Step 3, slow the pace and structure your time. I cannot emphasize to you how important these things are. And you're probably thinking, she's asking me to slow the pace at a time when I'm run ragged. That's exactly why you need to slow the pace. It is so, so important, and you will be much, much more effective both at home and at work if you can do that. Most of us are in a place of doing too much. Some of us who've gone through that massive change of losing a role might find we're doing too little. Either way, start noticing how you spend your time. In the book, I tell people to do this over a week. But right now, I would just do it over a couple of days. How am I spending my time? At the end of today, at the end of tomorrow, write down how you spent your day. Look at what you're doing, and then reflect on whether or not you can do it more effectively. Look at how you're using your energy. You'd be absolutely amazed sometimes about how you use your energy ineffectively in some of the tasks that you do. If you're coming away from something feeling exhausted, reflect on how you can do it differently. Do you need to take more breaks, for example? Your rest activity cycle is really important. Get up, move around, go and get a cup of tea, go and sit outside if you can. Fatigue management, very much linked to that rest and activity cycle. Can you do things differently to help yourself feel well? Try and get good sleep patterns. Stop working an hour, 2 hours if possible before you go to bed. Relax. Drink a hot chocolate, have a herb tea, go for a walk, spend some time breathing. I'm going to come to breathing in the next couple of slides. So use your time wisely. There's a little activity called pockets of time, and I love pockets of time. And this is where you can structure a pocket of time. It might be 10 minutes. If you're lucky, it might be an hour, but a pocket of time where you can really focus on one activity and do it well. You're doing it now, hopefully. I hope you're really focused on this session with me for this hour. Focus and don't multitask. It's very hard not to multitask right now, but the situation we're in is that if you can get that pocket of time and focus on it, then go away and do something else, then come back to your activity and do another pocket of time, you will be more effective. Calm the mind. This is really interesting one, and it's quite hard to do, but it is so, so important. And I want you to spend some time on reflecting of this one after the session today. We are always thinking, and usually negatively. And if you stop and actually pay attention to your thoughts, you realize how negative you are when you think. We're ruminating about the past, things that haven't worked well this morning, using our IT interface in our Zoom meeting. We didn't handle a particular situation with Joe Blogs very well. We wish we'd done it differently. The boss hates me because I'm not meeting my deadlines. We catastrophize about the future. The boss hates me because I'm not meeting, and therefore, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to have a hard time? The way to address this is to use thought-stopping techniques or relaxation techniques or meditation and mindfulness. I'm going to talk to you a bit about mindfulness in the next slide, but in terms of thought-stopping techniques, relaxation, meditation, and indeed mindfulness, I have quite a lot online in my website. There's a link to that at the end, and on my YouTube channel. And I would really suggest that you start going out there and using these techniques. It might be the first thing that you put into that ship of life to make a difference to where you're looking after yourself in order to get that life balance back in there. Take time out to do some relaxation, meditation or mindfulness, or thought-stopping techniques that are going to help you with your day. Sticking with that thought stopping techniques, one of the best things you can do when you're really getting stressed in your job, in action, or with the kids, or when you're feeling really down about your situation because of the job situation or whatever, is to use your breath. We breathe all of the time, 24/7. We never think about it. I'm so accustomed to helping myself with my breathing now that the minute I mention breath, I start to calm down. And it's about breathing deeply and having deep abdominal breathing. I've got an exercise that you can do for this online in my YouTube channel and on my website, so go and have a look later. Anyone of my age will remember the martini girl. Anytime, any place, anywhere, your breath is there, so you can use it. Feeling stressed? Okay. Breathe in deeply through your nose for a count of 3. Hold your breath for 3 and then breathe out for 3. Through your mouth. Makes a lovely ha sound, but you can breathe out through your nose if you want to. And if you can extend the out breath, that makes you feel even more relaxed. I would suggest that you don't do this more than 3 times to begin with, otherwise you're going to get lightheaded. But it will help you stop. It will help you break the cycle of negativity. It will help you feel calm. It's a brilliant technique to help you feel like you're in control. Let's move on to mindfulness, because I am aware of the time. Mindfulness is really misunderstood term. It's bandied about so much now, even I get weary of seeing it. I've got a nice little blog on my website about what mindfulness is, and I've got more detail in my book, but just go and read the blog. And it tells you exactly what mindfulness is. And mindfulness is really, and this is a misunderstood bit, about paying attention to the moment as it happens, as it unfolds. So hopefully you are here with me now, paying attention to this moment as I speak to you, as it unfolds, because you're focusing on me and engaging with me. I hope you are. So that is mindfulness, to pay attention and to engage in the moment as it unfolds. It's to try and become aware of yourself in the moment. Now imagine if you could translate this feeling to reading books with the kids, to doing your work, to cooking. Believe it or not, I met a mad woman who really used her mindfulness to wash dishes. Doesn't appeal to me, but you can do it anytime, any place, anywhere, a little bit like the breathing, and it's a technique that's well worth using. So I really suggest that you think about that. Another important part of mindfulness is, and you'll see this at the top point there, to see thoughts as thoughts. And that comes back to that thinking. And what it's saying to you there in mindfulness speak is how you think about things is something that you can control. It is a thought. It's the way you think. Now, you might be worrying about something that's really important, but if you can see it as a thought and you can breathe deeply and let that thought go, you'll start to feel more in control. It's a really important technique. Have a read of my website and try and practice that. And we come back to it on the last slide, actually. Step 6, share the load. This step has never been more important than right now, because we are in a situation quite unprecedented where we are trying to deal with carrying all the responsibilities of work at home ourselves. It's nuts. And reading the stuff that you've sent, I keep waving over here because they're here, reading the stuff that you've sent me on the Mentimeter, I know that most of you are in this situation. It's just really difficult. There are also those of you that are finding difficulties with managing the responsibilities in work because of the change and the expectations that are being put on you by the workplace. So when you think about your total responsibility burden, all the things that you're carrying and what you have to do, both at work and at home, this technique is asking you to think about, how can I share that responsibility out? Are there tasks I can delegate to others that can come away from me? Are there ways that I can manage that load so it feels more effective and I can get myself through the day without feeling so stressed and overworked and overburdened? Okay. And I would ask you to ask other people that you share your house with to think about their total responsibilities. So within the home anyway, you can share those tasks out more effectively if you're lucky enough to have other people to do it with. And I'd get your kids involved in this. It's quite important, and you'd be amazed, even young children will take on responsibilities. Things as simple as, will you sit with daddy or mammy and watch the film while I, mammy or daddy, depending on who you've asked, I'm going to be in a meeting, and then we're going to go for a walk together. And a 3-year-old would love that. So think about sharing out those responsibilities to get the pockets of time and manage your responsibilities and roles more effectively. Let's move on. Step 7, know yourself. This is a fascinating one, and I really want you to reflect on this one after we finished today, because so many of us get this wrong. I have a load of examples in the book about strategies we use that are so ineffective. Speeding up, multitasking, workaholism, trying to put ideas out of your mind and not worry about them so you can cope. It's called deferring. None of these are very effective. But the one I really kind of want to bring your attention to today is those little things that we do, that we try or think will help us to get through the day. Drinking loads of coffee, Lisa Simpson's doing that here. Well, you know, loads and loads of coffee drinking is not good for your well-being. That glass of wine, worse still, a bottle of wine at the end of the day that just helps you unwind. Eating lots of chocolate, you know, think about the Cookie Monster. I will eat my cookies if I can't be mindful. Well, really, he needs to be mindful. He doesn't need to eat cookies. Nothing wrong with eating some cookies, nothing wrong with having some coffee, nothing wrong with having some wine, but put strategies in place that are more helpful. And being a busy bee and doing everything, which is something I describe in the book, is not a good activity. So use the strategies here that I've talked about. Think what you do, slow down, pace, breathe, share the load. Now we're coming on, and my timing's great considering we had a little introduction at the beginning as well, is step 8. And this is perhaps the most difficult one for everyone to think about. And this is about making personal choices. And I know that most of you will have been saying, as I've talked through this and gone through the presentation, that, you know, she's talking rubbish because she doesn't know how out of control I feel. Well, we're all feeling out of control, and we all feel that our workplace is putting too much on us, or perhaps responsibilities at home are too great, and we can't control them. We can't manage them because it's external and it's being put on us, and it isn't our fault, and we're just trying to manage the fallout, if you like. And, you know, in COVID situations, well, that's absolutely wild, isn't it? You know, we're all feeling out of control in that situation. What can we manage? We don't know what's happening next. Well, there was somebody called Viktor Frankl. Some of you may have heard of him. He wrote a book called In Search of Meaning. And Viktor Frankl was a concentration camp survivor. And he said, no matter what happened, however difficult the situation was, I felt and found that if I did this, it helped, that I could control how I thought about things. People couldn't take that away from me. And this is such an important step in managing your work-life balance. I cannot say to you enough how important this is, to change how you think about things. Thinking about all the previous steps, it's really led us to this point. How I think about things, I can change that. However difficult my situation is, however out of control I feel, I can manage how I think about things. How do I do that though? Well, you know, it's a mindset shift change. It's believing that you can change how you think about things. It's using your mindfulness techniques. It's using your thought stopping techniques. It's using your breathing techniques. And it's also thinking about your personal integrity. Personal integrity is about what is important to you as a person, what really matters to me, and how can I make sure that I move towards that as the important thing for me. Okay, so some of you might feel that you've been compromising your family and caring responsibilities in order to manage your work-life balance. Others are feeling that they're compromising work in order to do that. Many of you are feeling that you cannot be as effective in work as you would like. Well, you're right. So what can you do to accept the fact, to make a mindset change that would say, that's the reality, therefore what can I do? Well, find that place of personal integrity. What's most important to you? Is it work? Is it home? Focus on that. Try and make decisions that are going to help you to get that without harming others. So workaholics out there, please bear in mind that there isn't an excuse to ignore your home responsibilities or the responsibilities and roles that you need to put into there. It's just about thinking, okay, I will focus on that. And I will do that in the best way that I can. We all compromise things that we have to do. We all compromise to achieve the things we have to do, and we let go of the things that are important. But I am asking you to put some important things back in there. That is the critical thing. What is meaningful to me, and how can I make sure I'm meeting that? That helps, big tick for personal integrity. And it also helps you to get well-being and meaning in life. When I talk about reconcile rather than compromise, I'm talking about accepting the fact that you cannot be perfect, accepting the fact that you cannot do everything that you perhaps feel you need to or have to do. You can only do the best that you can. And that, in this situation, in COVID times, is good enough. Workplaces, which are doing a very good job of making some people feel that they're a little bit inadequate, that they're not doing well, also have to accommodate and understand that in this situation, we cannot achieve the things we did previously, and we have to manage things differently. And that sense of acceptance and that sense of belief in your sense of self that you're doing okay is really important in getting that sense of life balance. And this little sort of poem here by Niebuhr perhaps summarizes that in the best way possible. Okay? Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think that is such an important little metaphor for trying to find a sense of self and well-being, trying to find a manageable sense of life balance in what we are doing right now in this very difficult time. And I want you to come back to this and keep thinking about it when you're feeling overwhelmed. And I want you to go through the exercises and put those in place to help you try and find that sense of life balance. So just to summarize, think about how you can make small moves to make a difference in your everyday experience of life balance. Small moves, people, just put something into that ship of life that is meaningful to you, whatever it might be. Aim for improving your well-being, reconcile your feelings, accept that you can't do it all. Look for life balance and resilience, because you need to have some resilience in order to give to others. So it's not a selfish thing. And think about your life balance and supporting others, getting the life balance and well-being of significant others around you, because that will make you feel good too. So we can now move on to our discussion. And hopefully there's been things that have come up on the pain to help with that, and we've got a little bit of time left to do that. Can I draw your attention to the Twitter account here? And please do use Twitter with me, and I will answer any questions on there as well, post our discussion. Use the hashtag Ship of Life and Living Life in Balance, and there is the list of more resources. There's my email if you want to contact me. There's my book. And underneath that, there's my website, my WordPress site, my mindfulness page on there specifically, and there's my YouTube channel, which has all those mindfulness activities, relaxation and breathing techniques. Okay.
Thanks, Teena. We've had a couple of quick questions come in before we end.
Yeah.
How do you suggest overcoming comparing yourself to others? So many have been redecorated, overhauled in their gardens, etc., and barely keeping afloat with work.
Well, you know, I'd say keeping up with the Joneses is not something you necessarily need to worry about. And I would say look after number one and think about accepting the fact that you can only do what you can do. Like before, you know, the gardening can wait. If people have been in a situation where they're lucky enough to be able to do their gardening, to make their gardens look brilliant, they're in that position where they're lucky. For you, don't measure yourself against others. Measure yourself against your own well-being. Measure yourself against your own ship of life and try and find your sense of self there. it doesn't matter what other people are doing. That's not what's important. It's about finding balance and well-being.
Thank you. And one more, any guidance on how to support colleagues with this when our organisation is about to go through a restructure? Some people will read slides about well-being, others would see it less value in this kind of thing.
Yeah, I think that's a difficult one when your organisation is going through a period of change. And I think, what I was making clear in the presentation is that our workplaces are not always the most supportive. They don't help as much as we would like. And it's very difficult for us as people to make our organisations see that perhaps they need to support us more. But if your organisation is going through a period of change and you're dealing with yet another process, and you're wanting to support your colleagues, I would suggest things like they learn some of these techniques to manage their work-life balance. They accept that they can't do everything. I don't know whether you're in a position of your organisation where you could suggest that they take some well-being days, or they take some time to actually think about supporting their staff through this period of change. I think those sorts of things can help.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Teena. I can highly recommend Teena's website. I've been on it and I've done some of the breathing exercises myself, which have been really helpful during this time. That's all the time we've got. I'd like to thank you all for attending this session. I hope you've got as much out of it as I have. I'd like to thank Teena. Thank you so much for a wonderful session. I think it's been really great. We've had some really positive comments coming through. Get in touch with us, get in touch with Teena if you've got any questions. But we'll end the session here. Thank you so much.
Thank you all very much. And as I say, do get in contact with me on Twitter, and I'm happy to have debates with you there. And I hope something I said was helpful. Diolch yn fawr. Bye.